Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is episode 402 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me, whether you're joining us here on YouTube or on all the different audio podcast platforms. It is week 6. It is Buffalo Bills week. And today, welcome back to the show, Bills analyst Mike Bundt. Mike, thanks so much for coming back on. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's an interesting week for both these teams. Really, for the Jets, obviously firing head coach Robert Saleh in a crazy whirlwind past 24, 36 to 48 hours by the time this episode will be up. So you head into this game as much of craziness has gone on with the Jets. Obviously, Bills coming off a tough loss in Houston. This is a game for first place in the division out at MetLife Stadium on Monday night. Another primetime showdown between both these teams. I guess I just want to start here. What are your overall thoughts on where the Bills are right now this season? And then obviously also just, we're talking to just now off air, but some of your thoughts on the Jets and where they stand post coaching change.
Yeah, starting with the Bills, 3-2 is actually where I expected them to be through 5 games. So that's not really bad, but the experience of the last 2 weeks makes everything feel like it's panic time in Buffalo. And not just because they've lost 2 games. Against Baltimore, they were absolutely handled by the Ravens. And then they get off to a slow start against the Texans, come back and actually have a chance to win it. They probably should have won it based on where they had the ball in the fourth quarter. But it's the offense that's really concerning for the Bills right now. And it's everything on the offense. They don't have playmakers in the receiving core. The guys that were expected to step up, like Dalton Kincaid, really haven't to this point in the year. They're facing injuries. Khalil Shakir, who has emerged as the number one receiver on the team, was out last week. He missed practice today. Curtis Samuel, who they invested in free agency, has not done much this year. He was out of practice today. Mac Hollins is being asked to contribute as a starting receiver when he's more of a special teamer. Keon Coleman is a rookie who's not known for his separation, is being asked to step up this season. They've actually become more of a run team at times, which James Cook has been impressive, but the offense has been having a lot of issues. And because they're not being able to get vertical, teams are starting to compact things against the Bills and really start pressing them and sending more guys at the offensive line, which is stressing out the offensive line, leading to more pressures on Josh Allen. And he had one of the worst games of his career on Sunday, going 9 of 30 for 131 yards and a touchdown. So it's been a tough few weeks for the Bills. But as we know, this game is for first place in the AFC East. And then after that, they have a stretch of games against Tennessee, Seattle, Indianapolis, and Miami. Not in that specific order, but they have 4 winnable games. So as a Bills fan right now, it kind of feels like get by this next game. If you can somehow get a win against the Jets, then you have a stretch of games where you should go no worse than 3-1. And if you do that, you're then sitting at probably 7-3 or no worse than 6-4. So while it is kind of crazy right now in Bills land, there is this feeling that it's going to get better as long as they can survive these injuries. Now, outside perspective on the Jets, I thought going into the season they would be a good team. I believed that they would be a playoff team, maybe not AFC East division champs. I know they became the favorite at one point with the betting odds. I was always kind of a believer that the Jets have a really good defense and that Rodgers can be good for them, but that you were never going to get the Rodgers of 5+ years ago. He struggled his last year in Green Bay. He then he missed all of last year, and now he's over 40 years old. He doesn't have the mobility he once had.
Yep.
I think there was some writing on the wall that would say he's not going to be a top 5 quarterback anymore. He's probably has a ceiling of a top 10 quarterback in New York. And pair that with that defense, probably looking at a 10-win team. Now, I still think that's possible for the Jets, but on the outside looking in, what I've seen so far is a good Jets defense that hasn't played at quite the elite level that they have in recent years, paired with an immobile quarterback that just has no ability to improvise or step outside the pocket. and weapons that really aren't stepping up as much as I would have thought. I would go into the season thinking Breece Hall is going to be your man, and that you build around the run, and then you let Garrett Wilson eat. Right now, it seems like it's very much let's try to force the ball to Garrett Wilson. Let's try to force the ball to Allen Lazard. Breece Hall's not doing anything. The rookie running back you have Allen has been solid, but it looks like your offense, minus the turnovers. I know last week there was interception issues, but minus the turnovers of what you guys were dealing with Zach Wilson for all those years, it looks like the offense is just as lost in different ways as what it was in recent years.
Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely the right assessment there on this team. Breece has been awful. I feels like his vision's not there than it was in previous years. And one of the biggest things I always said about Breece, and I think most football fans would say, is he made it look so easy. Like when he got to the open field, made guys miss so easy. It wouldn't even look like he was trying. He's got that type of speed, got that type of elusiveness to make guys miss and do damage in the open field. And right now he can't barely get past the line of scrimmage. Some of that's been the run blocking. Brendan Bates, one of our tight ends, has been terrible in run protection. So is Rucker, and even Conklin has been very good. So you haven't got much production from that perspective. But yeah, I think the run game's been a disaster, and that's caused some issues with the passing game as well, because teams are knowing that teams are able to stop the run, and now they're just setting up for the pass, and they can expect the pass to come in some of these situations because they know the run's not going to work. And that's where Garrett Wilson's gone off to a slow start. I mean, Allen Lazard has been, getting force fed, which isn't exactly what I had on my bingo card at the beginning of the year. But, Rodgers is going to rely on his guys. And I still think the Jets are going to go out and eventually get Devontae Adams, and that will be their big solution to all this. But we'll ultimately see, and we'll see what the Saleh firing does as well. I guess with Saleh getting fired, I wanted to bring up this question with Sean McDermott in Buffalo. Obviously not saying he's going to get fired, but after the game against Houston, it feels like there's been some issues between McDermott, I guess, and the fan base, the way they handled it late in that game. And even I feel like last year, some fans not quite jumped off the McDermott train yet, but started to maybe lose some belief in him. I guess, where do Bills fans and where do you stand on Sean McDermott right now as a head coach? And do you trust him moving forward? Kind of where do you feel you guys are at with him?
There's definitely a vocal group of Bills fans that want him gone.
Yeah.
Now, I don't feel like Terry Pegula or Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, are even close to that point. I don't think that's something that will happen this offseason, regardless of what this team does, because the Bills are kind of in a transition year. They've eaten over $60 million in dead cap. They got rid of a lot of older veterans. So it's not a rebuild, but a reset with this roster trying to create the next window. And they really did it to create financial flexibility to be aggressive next offseason, to kind of build that next core. So I don't think McDermott's job is really in jeopardy at this point. Maybe a year from now, if they're struggling still, that could be the case. When they were sitting at 6-6 last year, had they missed the playoffs, that might have been a time to make a move. But then there was an article in Buffalo by a local writer, Tyler Dunn. It brought up a lot of negative things about McDermott, but the team kind of rallied around Sean, and then they won the last 5 games of the season. They go into the playoffs. They end up getting the 2 seed. When going into the final week of the regular season, they thought they might miss the playoffs, and it kind of showed like the team had his back. Now I think there's a lot of vocal people in the fan base that don't believe he can win the big one. And when you have moments like Sunday where clock management is an issue at the end of a game, it kind of just reinforces those fans' opinions. Now, I do have faith in Sean McDermott. He has the second best record in the NFL since 2020. The Bills have the best point differential in the NFL during that time. They have had one of the top-ranked offenses, despite him being a defensive-minded head coach. And their defense is normally ranked in the top 5 in the league, and points allowed, yards allowed, and stuff like that. Now, this year, a little bit of aggression, but tons of injuries where they're missing half their starting lineup at times throughout the season. So I'm one of those guys that would say the Bills' biggest kryptonite is the Chiefs in the playoffs. They've played them in the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. They've lost all 3 times. And a lot of people will say, well, if McDermott can't get it done, get someone that can get it done. Well, my response back to those people is, who else is getting it done?
Yeah.
Who else is beating the Chiefs? The Chiefs have won 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls. They've been in 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls, and they're 14-2 in the playoffs the last 5 years. So I look at the Chiefs as the old version of the New England Patriots, where just because you're not beating them doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It's just that's greatness that you're going up against. And I would rather consistently give myself more chances and hope that one of these years we break through. But there is a lot of people in Buffalo that are kind of getting that point where they're done with him. And I think next year, if they don't make a run, that could finally be the point that they move on. But I don't think they're even close to firing him, like the Saleh situation. And even to address the situation on Sunday quick, where they did pass it 3 times inside their own 5-yard line with under 30 seconds left. They had no timeouts. They probably weren't going to get in field goal range. And I can understand on the outside why so many people are saying it's such a stupid situation to throw it 3 straight times. But it's important to note the Texans had 3 timeouts. The Bills' run game had been struggling in the second half. They weren't likely going to get a first down on the ground. And had they gone run, they're likely punting it, giving the ball to Houston with 10, 11 seconds left. And the Texans still would have had a chance to get maybe 5 yards on an out and kick a similar length field goal. So what my biggest critique of the situation for the Bills was not that they passed it 3 straight times, but that their quarterback, after it looked like he might have possibly been concussed a few minutes earlier, is taking deep shots down the field in making low probability throws when you're not going to be able to set yourself up for a field goal, when he has guys underneath for 5-6 yard gains that could force Houston to call a timeout while giving you a more manageable 3rd down situation. So I really blame it more on the offensive coordinator and Josh Allen making some mental mistakes than I do the coaching. But you know how it works. When you have a star quarterback, your fan base is going to always take his side, and they're going to scapegoat whoever else they need to avoid criticizing the star quarterback. And that's what happens a lot in Buffalo. When Josh Allen makes mistakes, they blame the coaching. They don't blame the quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of want to just follow along there with the Josh Allen points you made there late. The first 3 weeks looked great, right? Had the huge 4 touchdown performance against Jacksonville in the 40-point blowout, or the 47-10 blowout against at home. And in the last 2 weeks, right, some of the struggles, completion percentage, I think it was like 55% against Baltimore. They struggled. And last week, like you mentioned earlier, 9 of 30, which was really, really poor. Without Diggs, and we'll get to the receiving core in a second. I know you talked a little about it earlier, but what have just your overall thoughts on what Josh Allen has done here through 5 games of action without Diggs and with this receiving core? It feels like kind of 3 good ones and 2 not so good ones, which is where they kind of stand here, 3 and 2, of course.
Yeah, through 3 weeks, it was phenomenal. The Bills were averaging 37 points a game. They were doing exactly what people wanted them to do before the season. They had an efficient run game. They were getting yardage in chunks on the ground, and they were dinking and dunking. They were getting first downs, and they were moving the ball up and down the field. Against Arizona, 34 points. Against Miami, 31. And then against Jacksonville, they go off 47. So Josh Allen sat 2 quarters of the first 3 games because the Bills were just destroying teams late in the ball game. Against Baltimore, it's tougher. On the road, primetime environment, and the Ravens caused a lot of problems for the Bills offense. And then obviously everybody remembers the trick play where things just kind of went haywire, and they got destroyed from that point forward. Houston was really the one game, though, where I was disappointed. Against Baltimore, that's going to happen sometimes against an elite team like the Ravens. I don't consider the Texans an elite team. They might be 4-1. They might have a great record at this point, but they're squeaking by opponents right now. They are, and it's different them squeaking by than the Chiefs squeaking by. The Chiefs historically win Super Bowls. They find ways to win games. They're not always looking pretty in the regular season. Houston, I don't give them the benefit of the doubt after 1 playoff win with a young quarterback. So what I would say about the Houston game for Josh is his receivers need to help him out more. He's not getting separation. So Josh Allen, Josh Allen is a guy that likes to stand in the pocket and gun it to a guy once he gets open. He's not really always the anticipatory thrower. That's why he doesn't always really get yards after the catch, and we're not really effective on screen passes and short passes. On short passes, you'll notice like his placement on the ball isn't really that great. But because of his arm and his ability to sling it where he wants, he can get 15, 20 yards any given time. And then his ability to improvise is deadly. And then even running it is very dangerous. What I think is happening now is he doesn't have the receiver talent to really have those plays down the field. And without Khalil Shakir, his easy button was gone against Houston. Shakir has been an unbelievable find for the Bills out of Boise State in the 5th round. He's caught his last 27, 28 targets. I'm not talking like the ball is into his hand. Like last 27 passes to him have all been caught.
Yeah.
It's insane. And he's been a yak machine, and he's really been the easy button for Josh. And I think what's happening is Josh had the hand injury, and they wanted to run the ball a little bit less with him. Then he's missing his go-to receiver. His other guys don't have the ability to make plays. And on top of that, he's getting pressured at a much higher rate. And I think he's pressing a little bit. He's not taking the freebies underneath, and he's trying to carry everything on his shoulders. So it's part of it. I'll say this. Part of it, I get frustrated at Josh because you got to take the easy button stuff, but that's never been him, and he's always had success. So it's hard to tell him to do things that he really doesn't typically do. But analogy I've been making all week is if Daniel Jones went 9 of 30 against any team in the NFL with his group of receivers, we would still be saying at the end of the game, Daniel Jones sucks. Yeah. So if Josh Allen goes 9 of 30 with a crappy group of receivers, he's Josh Allen. You still expect him to do better. So it's one of those things where the Jets, after 2 games like this, is probably an awful matchup for this Bills offense. But the expectation is they're eventually going to find a way to get out of it, whether that be another receiver stepping up or the Bills being forced to change a few things. I will say 2 things that I think are a possibility going into this game, assuming that Josh is fully healthy. Look for him to run the ball more, because if he can't get things done in there, he's going to have to put his body on the line and get things done on the ground. And the second thing, this isn't for the Jets game, but it is something to look out for the Bills going forward. You guys have obviously been mentioned for Davante Adams. The Saints have been mentioned for Davante Adams. I think the Bills are going to be a serious player for a wide receiver, whether that be Adams, Cooper, or someone else. It's fairly obvious they need someone to open things up for this offense. And my biggest question is, if it gets to a bidding war between the Jets, the Saints, the Bills, who's going to be the one that makes that biggest offer? Now, the Jets have the cap room, the Bills don't, but the Bills can pay a little bit more to get them to absorb some cap room. It's going to be interesting how this all plays out.
Yeah, the Davante Adams situation's definitely something to look for, and it feels like it was going to happen this week, and now it doesn't. It's kind of been put on hold, so something to watch for when 2 division rivals are going at it for not only first place this week, but also for a player.
This Monday night game play a factor in it too. If the Jets lose to go to 2-4, Davante Adams could be saying, I don't know if I want to go to that situation. Derek Carr is hurt now, and he's going to be out this week for the Saints. Does he want to go to that division if the Saints lose another game? For Adams, there's a couple different ways to look at it from his perspective. He could – I know Adam Schefter was saying any team giving up a premium pick, like a second-round pick, is going to want to make sure Adams is part of their long-term future. Mm-hmm. But with his cap situation, non-guaranteed money, if a team was convinced he could be the missing piece for this year, it's theoretically possible a team like the Bills could give up a second and a fourth and say, we just want you for this year, and then be done with him at the end of the season. Now that could change how teams go forward. If the Bills are willing to give something up and not worry about what happens after this year, maybe they will compete with the Jets to try to make a move. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's definitely something to follow. I feel like it's gonna get done before. I mean, I really thought it was gonna get done over these last couple of days. Obviously, not happening, but I wonder how much longer. And yeah, you make a great point about Monday night potentially being a pretty large game, not just for the division, but also for the Devontae sweepstakes. How much get longer does this get closer to the November deadline? How much more does this get stretched out? And also the hamstring injury, I don't really know how much of that's a problem or if that's just once he
Does
gets
anybody
traded.
even believe it?
Yeah. What is that?
Does anybody even actually believe he has a
Yeah.
legitimate injury? I don't know. I mean, like,
Yeah. We haven't seen him. I mean, he had the one interview on the Kay Adams show, and that's it. He hasn't played. Obviously, it feels like once his hamstring will be good to go once he gets traded. It'll be like that meme with the guy taking the blanket off.
he'll go for like 130 in this first game. I
Yeah.
do feel like before everything has played out the last few weeks that the Jets probably were his number one choice to reunite with Rodgers. Obviously, the two teams, the Saints, the Jets, have been mentioned the most. Former quarterbacks that he's
Yep.
played with, but I do think the Bills are a wild card in this situation,
Yep.
just because he supposedly has told people he would be open to playing with the Bills and Josh Allen, and it is something where when you look at the Bills roster, it's such a glaring need that Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, has been known in the past to go out and make a move before the deadline for positions that he feels like are a necessity in order to try to make a run. Last year, he trades for Rasul Douglas,
Yep.
who has been great for the Bills at corner since coming to Buffalo. Early in his career, his first year in Buffalo, he traded for Kelvin Benjamin. Now, Benjamin ended up being a bust, but at the time, it appeared to be a big midseason acquisition. And that's something I keep having in my head is the Bills have 2 second-round picks going into this year's draft. They have the Minnesota second round and then obviously their own. So that is some extra ammo that if he's willing to just throw it aside, it might be the missing piece to what makes a deal happen.
Yeah, and since we're on the topic of receivers, we talked obviously a little bit just about Shakir and his absence last week with the ankle injury was definitely felt like you mentioned. Keon Coleman though, the rookie, of course, out of Florida State. What have you seen from him last week? Was the one catch that he did have for the 49-yard touchdown was I think a real big positive for the young wideout. What have you seen from him? And I guess, do you see him future-wise? Maybe now Devontae Adams would be right now come into the Jets receiving room. He'd go into most NFL receiving rooms, become the number one receiver. But do you see Keon Coleman potentially in the future turning into this team's number one wideout for Allen? Or I guess what have you seen from him and your expectations for him moving forward?
I have never considered Keon Coleman as a guy that's going to be a future number one on the Bills. A lot of fans, you could draft a guy early in the second round, they instantly put up super high, unreachable expectations on a kid. My thought is this. When Keon Coleman was entering his last season with Florida State, I thought he was a good player. Everybody thought he was a top 10, top 15 pick. Didn't perform at the level that many expected. Started dropping down boards. Then he has the slow 40 time. People then point out the lack of separation. And suddenly goes from this top 10, 15 pick to people saying, oh my God, this guy might not even go in the middle of the second round. He's not that good. He can't get separation. He sucks. And my kind of thought is this. When people are saying that he was a top 10, top 15 pick, I thought that might be a little bit high. That might be a little bit high. But then once people started saying third rounder, late second rounder, I thought that's a little bit low. The separation has kind of always been over talked about in my mind because the guy can make a lot of plays where he can go up and snag a football. He can do the back shoulder catches. And he's also a guy you can do short passes with, and he'll do stuff with the ball in his hand. So you don't need to make everything a long vertical pass for him. You can run other things and do things with the ball in his hands afterwards, which we've already seen in this last game. A nice, 10, 15-yard pass, makes the guy miss, takes it to the house for 49-yard touchdown. But my thought going into this year with Keon Coleman was that he was going to catch 30 to 35 footballs, maybe 300, 400 yards. 500 yards is going to be the upside. I don't know where these fantasy football magazines were coming at, thinking he was going to be a 50 to 60 catch, 700, 800-yard receiver. Just because Diggs was gone and Gabe Davis was gone, that was never the thought process. I always thought going into the season it was going to be Shakir and Kincaid, and Shakir has been great. Kincaid has been a disappointment, but I never understood the people hyping up Coleman. And as it sits right now, I still think with the financial flexibility the Bills have going into next offseason, that there is a splash move at wide receiver to be made. I look at this offense as Coleman is probably going to be one of your outside receivers for years to come, but there's probably going to be somebody else that they want that's going to have a higher upside. You can't just put someone that has no separation as your main outside receiver. So I do think for this year, it's really looking like Shakir's the one. Maybe Coleman is the two. I don't really know who you say is the two because there's really no number two receiver standing up. People thought it would be Samuel. He's been more of a gadget guy. But down the line, I think Coleman will be a solid, probably a number two receiver on this team. And I could see him with 50, 60 reception, 700 to 850 yard potential. But I don't think he's ever going to be a star in this league. I might be wrong, but I just, it's hard for me to see a guy with a lack of separation being a high-end receiver on the outside. Now, if they put him in the big slot, like what the Chiefs have done with Rashee Rice, maybe that changes things. But the Bills have Dalton Kincaid in the big slot at times. They have Shakir in the slot. I don't know if they have enough opportunities to do that with Keon Coleman.
Yeah, you mentioned Kincaid here a couple of times, and obviously been off to a slow start. What do you feel has been the biggest problem for him? Is it just a disconnect between him and Allen? What has been the problem for why he has not been able to fully take off after what was a pretty promising rookie year last year?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, to be honest. I thought when Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator, they started incorporating him more, giving him more shots down the field after Ken Dorsey really didn't give him much at all. It was all short dink and dunks early in the season last year to Kincaid. He ended up with 73 catches, over almost 700 yards. So he ended up having a pretty good rookie year for a tight end. And this year he's on pace for, I think, low 50s in receptions. The yardage is down. Some of it is probably game plan. Other of it, maybe it's the way defenses are defending the Bills. It's just a combination of a lot of things. Teams are keying on him. And then he also just hasn't been playing as well. He's had some drops in recent games, which he's known for having great hands. But I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It's scheme, it's how he's being defended, and it's a quarterback that really isn't throwing it as well as he has in the past. Josh Allen is throwing for 189 yards a game right now. He's on pace for 3,200 yards this season. He's been a 4,100 plus passing yardage quarterback the last 4 years. So they're really just the Bills passing game in general is just non-existent, which some of it probably is because they don't have Diggs here anymore. But to be honest, a lot of this was already happening before Diggs left. If you go back 11 games to the Dallas game last season, the Bills have only averaged 199 yards passing per game the last 11 games. And that counts the final 4 regular season games and 2 playoff games the Bills had last season. So whatever is going on, there is issues with how the Bills are attacking teams in the air, whether that be a weapon issue, whether that be a scheme issue or a quarterback problem, but they're just not able to get it done. And the weird thing is, I actually think they started going more to a run game midseason last year to kind of reduce the costly turnovers, and the turnovers have gone away. Mm-hmm. But it seems like with the turnovers going away, so has the Bills' offense at times. Josh Allen had 18 interceptions last year. Do you know how many he has through 5 games?
None.
0. Yep. So he can take care of the ball, but I think Bills fans right now would take a few turnovers if it meant getting a little bit of a spark for this Bills offense.
Yeah, definitely something to look forward to here on Monday night. Once again, we're talking to Bills analyst Mike Bundt here, previewing all angles of the Jets-Bills Week 6 Monday night showdown out at MetLife Stadium. I want to shift over here to the defensive side of the football for Buffalo. I guess just your thoughts overall, general overview from what you've seen from this defense 5 weeks in.
for the most part, they're overperforming right now. Now, a regression was kind of expected, maybe not by the Bills fans, but by me and people across the country. I thought with the guys they were missing, they would still be a top 8 to 12 defense as their ceiling, but they have really found a way to continue playing well despite injuries to like half their defense. People know about the safety situation. No more Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. They have DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp back there, who came back to practice today after missing last week. They had rookie Cole Bishop start against Houston. He was lost on a long touchdown to Nico Collins, which is something you never see really against the Bills, is explosive plays against this defense for the most part. Then at linebacker, Matt Milano for the second straight year, long-term injury. He'll be back later in the year, most likely, but that's not a guarantee. Terrell Bernard just returned from injury, and they got him by for a little bit without him. So right now it's Bernard and Dorian Williams. And cornerback-wise, the strength of the team. Christian Benford is a star on this team that no one talks about because he's a 6th-round pick from Villanova from a few years ago. But he's one of the best corners in all of football right now. And Rasul Douglas has been pretty solid too. Teams do not normally target receivers going up against those two guys. Yeah. It's the middle of the field that's been the Bills' issue. And having Bernard back does help in that area. When Bernard was out, it was definitely a trouble spot. And defensive line, another issue. Ed Oliver missed last week. That's obviously key. Daquan Jones hasn't been as good as what he was in the past. Von Miller obviously suspended right now, so that takes away a little bit from the pass rush. But I'll say this about the defense: they're sometimes going to be vulnerable against the run because they like to primarily be in a nickel base defense. Their base defense is nickel, so they're going to have disadvantages going up against truly special run teams, as we saw against Baltimore, a team that can run the ball and pound them while also being able to get things done in the air is going to create matchup problems for the Bills. But there's only a few teams in the league that can do what Baltimore does against the Bills. And if you are a team that is running it for only 4.5 yards per carry against the Bills' nickel defense, you're going to be in for a long day. Because if they can have an average day against the run compared to most defenses, their secondary is going to be able to contain you. And they're going to put you in long situations. And even when they've gotten off to poor starts in games, like against Arizona trailing 17-3, and then Houston trailing 20-3, they've made second half adjustments to where they have locked down both of those teams in the second half. When they played Jacksonville, when they played Miami, neither Trevor Lawrence nor Tua was able to do anything against the Bills defense. The only team that has really exposed them for 60 minutes has been the Ravens. And I don't see many teams being able to do what the Ravens have done against the Bills. So if I'm the Jets, I'm hoping Breece Hall can figure out his game and go off to kind of open things up for Aaron Rodgers. But if early on, and you can normally tell early on with this Bills defense if it's going to be a long day for them against the run or not. If you see the second drive, they're holding Breece Hall to like 2-3 yard carries. That's going to make it a long day for Aaron Rodgers overall, because teams need to be able to effectively run the ball against the Bills to set up the pass. And if you can't run the ball, normally that's not a good sign.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, hopefully if Breece takes the bricks off his feet, whatever's happening, he's got to find a way to get going. Braylon Allen's done some good things, but Breece, I mean, 29 yards in the last 2 weeks is just inexcusable. He's got to be significantly better. So we'll see if they can attack that on Monday night. You mentioned Benford. I just want to talk a little bit about him. You know, obviously a former 6th-round pick out of Villanova has really kind of stepped in to a big-time role like you were talking about here in the secondary. What do you feel has been the biggest thing for him as to why he's kind of taken off here?
First of all, I'm just going to say he's just a baller. So I know that's so generic and simple to say, but he was drafted the same year the Bills took Kaiir Elam in the first round, a corner out of Florida. And as a rookie, he won the job over Kaiir. So, like, as a 6th-round pick rookie, he won a job over a 1st-round pick rookie at the same position. So the Bills liked him right off the get-go. But he had injuries his rookie year. He was okay as a rookie. He didn't really – if you look at his PFF grade, it's not really that sharp. But he had moments where he showed some nice things. Last year, very special. Already, like, as a second-year player, showed elite ability. And I don't know if there's just one thing that you can mention about him. He's really good in run support. He's a solid tackler, but he's fundamentally sound. He's in the right spots at the right time. He has good footwork. You look at the deeper charts right now this year. He's one of the best corners in the league at limiting separation versus what's expected. So he's really just been great in all areas. And a lot of the people that break down film and they look at the numbers, they say he's one of the top 5 corners in football at the present moment. And I think with a guy like him, he did play at a high level at Villanova. It's just that he did it at Villanova. He was an FCS All-American. He had good measurables. He had good testing and everything. Just people didn't know if that was going to carry over to the next level. So the one thing that Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbitt have kind of been since they've been in Buffalo is they're whisperers for secondary players. Sean McDermott is a cornerback whisperer. Whoever he puts back there normally has success. Like, we're talking about a defense that throughout the years has had guys like E.J. Gaines. They've had Dane Jackson. They had Levi Wallace. So all those are, outside of E.J. Gaines, those are undrafted late-round picks that are starting, that get by in the secondary. Micah Hyde was a good, not great player before he came to Buffalo. Jordan Poyer was a no-name before he came to Buffalo. Yeah. They turned them into all pros. You look at now a guy like Jamarcus Ingram. He was an undrafted free agent out of UB. He had 2 interceptions against the Miami Dolphins week 2. There's some. Cam Lewis was an undrafted free agent out of UB. So we have guys from our little MAC school here in Buffalo that the school struggles to win 7-8 games. Sometimes they have years they win 3 games. They're going undrafted, and then 3 years into the NFL careers, they're making plays in prime time. So I think Benford and McDermott is just a match made in heaven. It's a guy that understands football and knows where he needs to be, is good with the fundamentals. Then you have a coach telling him everything he needs to do to be successful. And that's ultimately why this Bills defense has been able to still get by, because you would think with all the guys that they have lost that there would be a much bigger drop-off than what they've had.
Yeah, 100%. It feels like you said, kind of a cornerback whisperer, but it feels like just plug and play in a way over there, and obviously in Buffalo. And I am curious just where I know you cover obviously Buffalo a lot, the University of Buffalo. Where is that program at, I guess, in terms of just rebuilding? You kind of mentioned there they've struggled a little while back. I know they've made some changes, but
yeah. So they are in the first year of a new head coach, Pete Lembo, and this was supposed to be a rebuilding year. They returned their backup quarterback. They were hoping to bring in some transfers, but didn't really bring in anybody that was notable that could take over the starting position. They're struggling in the pass game. Their run game isn't the best, but they're off to a 3-2 start. They already matched their win total from last year after the coach left to become the Alabama co-defensive coordinator. And that was kind of a little bit of an insulting move because he didn't do it right away. He waited a bit and it was more of an abandonment than it was taking a promotion. It was, I see the writing on the wall. I'm probably going to get fired after next year, so I'm going to leave and look out for myself while the rest of my coaching staff loses jobs and is out on their own. And Pete Lembo has kind of re-energized that program. And a few weeks ago, they head to DeKalb and they beat number 23 Northern Illinois a few weeks after Northern Illinois upset Notre Dame. So that was only the second time in UB history they defeated a ranked team. Now, I know Northern Illinois isn't the 23rd best team in the country, but it's still an incredible accomplishment for UB. And now this week they host Toledo, which is a big MAC game because there's no longer divisions. And if UB can somehow pull an upset, they'll be 2-0 with wins over Toledo and NIU, the 2 teams that were expected to compete for a conference championship before the season. So what I'll say to sum up for UB football, this is probably a team that's going to be fighting to try to get bowl eligibility this year. I think it's possible, but they'll probably be fighting for 6-7 wins, which before the year we were saying maybe 4 or 5 wins. The defense is very solid. They have a linebacker who's from the Buffalo area, who's leading the nation in tackles. He is second in tackles for loss per game. So there's hope that this team in the next few years can build back into being a MAC contender. And who knows if some things go their way this year, maybe they could even give it a run this season. But I still think it's a little bit away.
Yeah, the NIU upset was crazy to see them go obviously into Notre Dame and knock them off. Now I want to get to just some other things here with the Bills. Going back here to the defensive line, Greg Rousseau, of course, first round pick 2021 out of Miami, has done a really good job entering here in his fourth season. What have you seen from him right now? I think shares a lead with the team in sacks. So Von Miller, the 3 sacks, but obviously suspended. What have you seen from Rousseau here, and just what does he bring to the table, week in and week out since he's been drafted?
Rousseau is the best player on the Bills' defensive line. I don't really look at his sack numbers because I don't look at him as a premier pass rusher.
Yep.
I look at him as someone that has the ability to rush the passer, can get 7 to 8 sacks in a given season. Maybe he has an upside of being a double-digit guy. But I think what makes Rousseau great is he knows where he's supposed to be. He knows his containment. He's very, very, very good in the run game, which is a difficult assignment for any defensive end in a nickel defense because it's all about gap integrity and staying in your spots. And Rousseau is a big reason why the Bills are able to still be an effective team in nickel against the run, even though in reality, like they probably shouldn't be from a numbers perspective. And Rousseau he's good. Like I said, when quarterbacks are forced to step up in the pocket, he's good at cleaning things up. I think Rousseau is solid. Ed Oliver has always been solid, but he's more of an impact pass rusher. He's more of an explosive playmaker. I don't think he's consistently great at certain things like stopping the run. And Epeneza's been okay. This line is one of those D lines where you look at it, it's probably not as good as the Bills have had in some years, but it's solid overall. I don't think it's an elite unit, but I think it's definitely a solid, probably above average defensive line, in my opinion, with the upside of being even better when they have their guys really clicking.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, it feels like, from that perspective, the Jets as well, talent-wise, or maybe not as elite as it's been. The Jets last year were elite up front. I would say this year they haven't quite been that from a pass rushing perspective, but still very quality defensive line and 2 very solid defenses here going into this game. Obviously, some really intriguing matchups to watch there as well in the secondary for this one. So on that topic, just to kind of wrap things up here, what are some matchups you're looking forward to in this one? And any underrated players on Buffalo that Jets fans should keep an eye on Monday night that we maybe haven't discussed already?
Yeah, so I'll say the first matchup or key to the game, because this isn't really a matchup, it's how do the Jets run the ball against the Bills? Yeah. That's the number one thing I'm looking at. As I said earlier, if the Bills are able to control the Jets' run game, I think it's going to be a long night for the Jets' offense. Number 2, and this is probably the biggest thing for the Bills, is are they able to get the passing game going? And I think it's going to be tough. The Bills don't have separators right now. We don't know the status of Khalil Shakir. If Khalil Shakir is playing in this game, I'll feel a little more comfortable for the Bills. But if I'm the Jets, I'm putting pressure on Josh Allen in this game. Right now, James Cook might be questionable for this week. He was out of practice today. That means you're looking at Ty Johnson or Ray Davis being the Bills' starting running back. They could be without Khalil Shakir. You could be looking at a receiver core of Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman. Who even knows? Curtis Samuel was out today with a toe injury as well. So you're looking at a team that is missing literally all of their key players right now in practice on offense. So the Jets, I would basically say you should be able to have your corners basically have not much issues controlling Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman, play against the run, pressure Allen, and just hope he doesn't have a superhuman performance where he carries the Bills beyond what they should be. On paper, this looks like it's going to be a low-scoring game, in my opinion. The Jets probably have more potential of putting points up, but I don't know if I trust your run game to be able to consistently exploit the Bills. ultimately, what I do think you're going to see a lot from the Bills, and I said earlier, this is a game where as long as Josh is healthy and there's no further risk of injuring himself,
Yeah.
he should probably carry the ball 7 to 10 times in this game.
Yeah.
This should be a Josh Allen running affair where, as Jets fans, you're like, God damn it. Like, why is this guy doing this to us? And if he can do that, maybe that'll open some things in the pass game. But I could see this being a much lower scoring game than what you're used to seeing in a normal Sunday or a normal contest if you're just scrolling across the league.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And it's one of the biggest things I'm just looking for is just how the Jets come out in this game, right? A crazy week, a lot of outside noise. How does this team? It's been good that they've had an extra day here to prepare. It's not like you're doing this on a short week, firing the head coach, although they didn't fire Monday, which probably would have been the most logical time to do it. But, the Jets, they don't do anything really right. So it's normal. But I'm really intrigued just to see how they come out. One of the biggest issues under Saul is they come out flat. They have slow starts. They're not ready to play. The biggest test early here for Olberg is this team ready to play? Do they bring energy right out of the gate here? Get the crowd involved early. You can't have this where Buffalo goes down, scores the first drive, and all of a sudden now you're reeling 3 and out, 10-0 before, you look up 8 minutes in and it's already, 10-0. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to. But to close things out here, where can everybody find all your stuff on, social media, your Twitter, all that good stuff, and all your Bills content?
Yeah, so you can find my stuff on Mike_Bundt on Twitter. And then I'm part of Trainwreck Sports, growing account on Twitter and on Instagram. Over 34,000 followers on Instagram now. And on Twitter, we're approaching 20,000. So you can make sure to follow us on Trainwreck Sports, and then my own personal account, Mike_Bundt. Yes, I'm Bills oriented and Buffalo sports oriented. But if you ever want to get a little bit about your New York opposition every once in a while, make sure to follow me. And I'm not one that will troll Jets fans or anything like that. I always like to go back and forth and have quality conversations about any team that the Bills take on.
Yeah, definitely. It's always great having you on the show. I think this has been the third time, so it's awesome. Always a lot of fun. And hopefully a good showdown here on Monday night. As always, stay tuned. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. And until next time, JETS, 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 Jets. Talk to you soon.